Hi everyone, and welcome to Child Protection Party Friday night feed. This one sounds like we're going to have something to eat, doesn't it? It sounds well. You can. We're going to. So tonight we've got just a couple of issues that Avery and I want to talk about. And just before I start talking about one of those issues, just like to welcome Avery. Hi, buddy. Good to see you again.
Hi. How are you, Tony? I'm good.
That's good. Glad to hear it. I'm hoping we've got a bit of better coordination with our audio this time than we did last time we did the feed. So I guess the important thing is that people can still hear us, can't they? So
that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if lips syncs exactly.
Lips aren't syncing as they perhaps should be syncing. Well, that is fine. We've had an interesting day today, haven't we? A conversation with someone else from Child Protection Party that was very, very beneficial. So we want to thank her.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's amazing, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
So you've got some issues that you would like to talk about. Is that right?
Yep, I do. Just one particular issue, but the one that you wanted to talk about, I think, is more important. So we should discuss that one first.
Well, I think they're all kind of important, but
they are.
Yeah. So this is the more practical thing that I encounter when working with people around child protection issues. So here we go. I just want to also say that it's important to understand that the Child Protection Party is not just about child protection per se. It is about improving outcomes for children so that all children have a better opportunity at life generally. So some of the areas in which we're interested in, of course, is children with disability, access to NDIS, for example, access to other services in relation to autism and what other difficulties a child may have, learning difficulties, for example. Education is vital, and we're certainly wanting children to have the best possible education that they can. So these are issues that are important to us. Youth suicide is also an issue which concerns us greatly. The well-being of children, their mental health is important to us. So even though we do have child protection in our name, it is about protecting all children, and we must be clear that is what we are definitely about. So, but we often have these conversations about, so I want to talk about something that is definitely child protection related. Avery's going to talk about something that's kind of not necessarily always child protection, but is kind of connected in a way. And the first thing I want to talk about is the inability of the department to make appropriate decisions. Now, we've talked about this many, many times before, but it doesn't hurt to, I guess, continue the conversation, because it's fundamentally a problem with the child protection system, and that is the way social workers, psychologists, and those people that work within that system have the ability to be able to make decisions that ostensibly are harmful. The situation I want to talk about, so I'm going to present a case study tonight to you of a case where I know the guy that's involved in this, one of the parents, I know very, very well. I've been working with him for many, many years. I understand all the work is done around his own efforts to be able to improve himself and have his children returned to him. At every step, he has failed. He's used every outlet that he can in terms of seeking advocacy, in terms of the type of lawyers that is employed to do the job for him. But at the end of the day, the department have made up their mind that this person is simply a bad parent. Now, I want to speak as a social worker who has worked with him, understands him, who has been a social worker for 30 years, who's worked around domestic violence. And I mention that particularly because that is part of the issue that we want to talk about today. When I evaluate someone, I'm able to assess, because of my length of time and this experience, particularly working in the domestic violence space, I'm able to assess whether someone is potentially violent or has been violent, or whether they're likely to have improved their behaviour to a point that they're no longer a threat to kids or to a family. And I have assessed this particular bloke as being no threat whatsoever to anybody, for that matter. However, he has chosen to have a relationship with a woman who was interstate and who came to Adelaide to live with him, and she brought her son with him. Now, one of the reasons why she particularly left that state was that she was escaping from a violent and abusive relationship. In fact, the person that she was escaping from had been jailed because he's contravened his apprehension violence order. So he was known as a perpetrator. She has talked about the damage that he had done to her and to her young son. Now, once she had moved in with my client, she discovered later on that the department, well, she clearly knew that he had had issues with the department because he had had children removed from him, regardless of all the work that he had done in order to try and improve his own sense of self and his own behaviour, which, in my view, he had done. However, there was an incident where the young lad had hurt himself, unbeknown to the parents, went to school or kindy, I can't remember which one it was, and someone reported the incident. Of course, the department latched onto that straight away because he was living with this person that they had identified as being abusive historically, even though there was only one case where he had been abusive. I, in fact, would argue that the person that was abusing him the most was his ex-partner. However, the department had made up their minds, chose to remove the child. The incident that I want to talk about particularly, though, is what follows, because there was nothing he could do to present his case to let the department know that he is now a completely different person. I would argue that he should never have had the children removed from him in the first place. He was a person who was prepared to make the changes required, and in my view, he had done just that. But what would I know? What does 30 years experience tell them, these young social workers in particular, about anything that someone like mine may wish to express in terms of my working with an individual? The interesting thing here is that eventually the department decided, after they've removed this young child from his mother, they decided that this other person, my client, was not fit. And so they went to court, and clearly the magistrate was unhappy with the way this case was unfolding. They had presented all this information about my client, who wasn't a party to the proceedings anyway, but the mother was living with him. And the magistrate was uncertain as to where this case was going and said to the department, "You fix it. I'm not going to fix it. You fix this case." So this is how the department fixed it. And this is what's interesting. They decided to go and visit the father, who lives interstate. A fair way away, I hasten to add. A couple of plane trips in order to get there. But so these workers decided perhaps a little bit of a trip interstate probably wasn't a bad thing, even though COVID was pretty dominant. But nevertheless, let's go and make this trip and spend a few days in this other state, which they did, to meet this guy, the father of the son. Now, remember that the history in relation to this man had been, from the mother's perspective, he has been extremely abusive, physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially abusive of her. My client hadn't expressed any of those qualities whatsoever, but that's how he was identified. They met this guy who had been jailed for contravening an apprehension violence order. So they went and met him, and they decided, based on the fact that this guy had said that he's done all that he could do in order to rectify the problems that sat in his life. He had fixed them, apparently. I haven't met him, and I'm going to be fair. Maybe he is a saint. I don't know. But my experience is that my client was lumbered with these defining attributes which are not true, and the client, and this other bloke, who expressed far more violence than what my client had ever expressed, he was the one that they'd now chosen to send this child back to. When I was at a meeting with them the other day, I was rogueable and probably not very kind and probably a bit loud, and I interrupted them on occasions. I probably didn't actually work appropriately in some way when I was talking to them. But I was upset because I could not understand why someone with relative experience, such as mine, could see something one way and the department could see it the other way. Now, the other interesting thing is, these are new workers. These weren't workers working with him on his previous case. These were new workers. They couldn't even find the time to sit down with him and interview him and talk to him and find out what he thinks, how he feels, what changes he has made in his life that are significant, which would have been important in making an assessment as to whether this child could live with him and the child's mother, as opposed to living with an abusive father. They didn't take the time or effort to do any of that. They've now decided that the child should live with the abusive parent. And I'm horrified, primarily because I see the injustice in all of this, but also because I know this is the type of decision making they make. I have client after client who will tell me, and in many occasions women will tell me how they're not believed. Now, in the era of the Me Too movement, it is important that we believe women. It's important that we believe anybody who tells us that they have been abused. But the department clearly don't care. They have made up their mind about an individual, are not prepared to research, to try and understand who this particular person is. They are prepared, though, to take a child and place this child in what has been recently an abusive relationship, placed him back to the father, who in my opinion would not have had enough time to have demonstrated whether or not he is now a different person, able to manage his behaviour differently. They haven't been able to demonstrate that. But that's their decision. And my fear is that this young kid is going to wind up with this father who still is abusive, who alienates this child from his mother, just as the department have chosen to alienate her from her own son, which is what they have done. So they have told her that she cannot live with my client, that she needs to live elsewhere, and encouraged her to move back to this relationship which she had, which was violent. Jesus. Now, this contravenes everything that I understand about social work, social justice, fairness, equity. If she moved back with him, she would be able to have her child. It is that they will not allow her to stay with my client. Try and help me, someone, make sense of this crap, because it's appalling. And we need to call it out when it happens. We really do. And there aren't enough people in our community standing up for women around these issues. So we now have a woman who says that she's in love with my client, wants to stay in that relationship. He is a good man. There's no reason why she shouldn't. He doesn't assault her. He doesn't abuse her. He's a good man. But the department would prefer her to go back to this abusive guy. So, Avery, have you got any comments about my rave?
The very first thing I noticed was in this. I know the person you're talking about, and I agree he's done an awful lot of work to change his ways, and he's a great guy.
He is.
Love him. He is a great guy. The department have done what they typically do, which is to say, oh, back then he was like this, he must be the same now. The second thing is the guy interstate who went to prison, he's changed. He must have changed because the department were happy enough to send this kid back to him.
Yeah.
So your client can't possibly have changed, but this other guy, however long he had in jail, was obviously.
I think it was something like 15 weeks. It's not a long time when you.
15 weeks or 15
days or whatever. I can't remember.
I don't believe that person has changed. If he was abusive enough that they had to take an apprehended violence order against him and then put him in jail for breaching it, he's not changed, and he's not going to change. And that child has now been placed by the Department of Child Protection here placed in danger by putting him with that father.
And he needs, I think the thing too, where Avery, when you're working around domestic violence, is there's a couple of things. Number one, you can always tell whether people change. They're taking responsibility for their behaviour. They're identifying how that behaviour is impacting their partner, their ex-partner, whatever, their children. They understand, they're able to articulate that, and they can talk about that in a way that's sensible, I guess. The other thing too is that they sometimes need time to demonstrate that they have made those changes. So my fear is that the child goes back, he puts the child down, denigrates the mum, right? Because no one's there watching any of this. I don't know what other services are supposed to be put in place to check on all of this stuff. No one's in the home 24/7. So, and then the relationship between the mother, which the son has a strong relationship with at the moment, gets disintegrated. And that relation fractures. And what does that do to the mother? What does that do to the son? The person that supposedly wins out from all of this is the abusive father. So it's just wrong at every possible level. Now, some people have made comments. Avery, are you able to see the comments today or not?
I can see them today. There's one there. Did the father show any interest? The one interstate, did he show any interest in the child before the mother moved away?
My understanding is that he did, but I'm not 100. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. The child's of an age where clearly he must have shown some interest. They were living together. The degree. Now, I just need to say, I haven't met the father, so there's lots of assumptions I'm making here. As I said before, he could be Jesus Christ himself for all I know, but I doubt it. So.
Well, so the thing that strikes me is that, as I said, it got to the state where an AVO was taken out against him. He ended up spending 15 days in jail because of breaching that AVO, and the mother left the state. The department here has decided that yes, he's changed, and your client couldn't possibly have changed, despite the fact that all the work that he's done and that you've done with him, he's definitely a changed person.
You nailed it, Avery. That's exactly good summary, mate. Absolutely. And there's been some great comments, and someone says here that father, someone who knows the case, is not a biological father and shown no interest. Is not a biological father. It's not shown interest in the child till the mother moved away. Wasn't aware of that, JJ. I must confess. Sadly, the department doesn't make right decisions or investigations. They're always one-sided. I think it's fair to say that the department, Avery, no matter what decision they make, will disadvantage somebody, particularly when there are two parents involved. They're separated, and they tend to want to favour one another. The department have got no concept of trying to negotiate some common ground that they can work with parents. They've got no sense of conflict resolution, so it seems. So they haven't got any sense. So they pass it off to the family law court, which they tried to do in this case, in order to have the family law court. This is the other issue, which I didn't mention, that the family law court, so they pass it off saying, if the father has a child, it needs to go to the family law court. But if the family law court decide, or the circuit court, what do they call it now, if they decide that this child could live with the mother, who still wants a relationship with my client, then that would mean that they would then step back in, because when it comes to child protection, the state child protection system basically trumps the family law court, because the family law court refers everything back to the child protection system for assessments and so forth. Even though it is possible, I would suggest, I'm not a lawyer, so someone might prove me wrong, for a family law court to say, well, we've got all the information from the child protection system, and we don't agree with it. In which case that may very well trump it. But normally they defer it back. So, yes. So there we go. And before we carry on, though, I just want to let everybody know that they could subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Please contribute.
There's a question's come in.
Yep.
And that's from Tracy Barrett. She said, did the child have any voice in any of this?
No.
Do you know how old the child is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge. Child's quite...
Okay.
Well, the child's old enough, and I guess he's relatively articulate enough to be able to say how he feels.
But to your knowledge, they didn't involve him?
Well, to my knowledge, well, I don't know, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the honest answer. I don't know. Okay, Avery, would you like to head off to the other issue, which is one that we raised the other night, and that people, and that you want to get? Is it you want some clarification over it? I guess.
You mean the other topic? The topic I wanted to talk about tonight?
Not the topic. The number of notifications. There was an issue around that, right?
Oh yes. You've got a graph that you can put up.
I have, but we'll just go to your gorgeous face first, and then I'll pick it up.
God, no! You don't want to scare people away.
So, do you want to see the graph? Put the graph up now.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in our live feed, the live feed that we did, was it on Tuesday?
Yeah.
I mentioned that in 2019, 2020, there was something like 102,000. There it is. In 2019, 2020, there was 102,830 notifications were made through Carl and eCarl here in South Australia, and then up to the 31st of October 2021, there's only 8,771. And I said I thought it's to do with COVID. And I just left it there. But thinking about it afterwards, and talking with you, Tony, today. How did COVID impact it? And the answer is that the schools have been closed.
Because this is a massive drop, isn't it, Avery?
It's a huge, I mean, that looks, at first sort of blush, looking at that thing, it looks like we've been extremely unfair to Minister Sanderson, saying what terrible child protection minister she is, because that's a huge drop, 94,000 drop. Why are we criticising her? She didn't do anything to achieve this drop. The schools were closed. And the schools are, if I understand it, teachers are the major source of the reports to Carl. Yeah,
and that they are. And I think the interesting thing about these stats were that when you mentioned it, I wasn't quite focused on what you were saying, but the government isn't responsible for the number of notifications. There's other factors involved, I guess, Avery, in why people are or are not notifying. And as you said, rightfully so, the school system is the one that notifies the most. So if they're not at school, then the number of notifications tend to decrease. The other reason could be that there's a lot of kids just generally at home and people staying at home. So the kids aren't necessarily out and about where other people may notice whether or not they've got bruises on them or be concerned about them. They're much more insular. So the reason was that it was about the amount of time spent to respond to a phone call. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Because back in 2000, or in the year that Sanderson became minister, it was 40. The average wait time was something like 42 minutes, and by the 31st of October 2021, it dropped down to 10 minutes and changed. 10 minutes 20 seconds, something like that. and
the reason for that, Avery, basically is because the number of notifications had dropped.
Yes.
So clearly, if you've got less people contacting them, then then the time's going to be used more efficiently, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the issue.
I mean, looking at that graph, it sounds like she must have got the department to employ hundreds more people to take telephone calls. Nothing of the sort. I don't think the numbers have changed that much. I wouldn't be surprised that some of them were sent home because of COVID.
Yeah,
so or they had to work from home.
So, folks, the reality was that Sanderson isn't a genius. The simple fact is that COVID is, because less people were reporting, the numbers had dropped, and therefore the waiting times were less. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Even me, a non-mathematician, can work that out. So there was another issue. I'm going to pass this over to you to talk about, and then we'll have a conversation about it afterwards. Do you want to go for it?
Yep, will do. I saw a report last night about a lady living here in
For some
in
reason,
Adelaide.
I've lost your. Hold on, I've got to put you back, mate. Bear with. There we go. Sorry.
Okay. I heard a report last night about a lady living here in Adelaide. She's a single parent with 4 kids. She was given 2 weeks' notice to vacate her house by her landlord, and the housing available for rental here in South Australia is so bad that she is going to be living in her car in 2 weeks' time with 4 kids. Right. Yeah. The other thing that came out from this report that I saw was that because there is so little housing, market forces come into play, and the rents have soared. So where the average rent about 3 months ago was, say, something like $350 a week, it's now $450 a week. How can somebody, a single parent with 4 kids, look after their how can they look after their kids? How can they make those payments? How can they find that extra $100 and still feed the kids and make sure the kids are well looked after? And it's bound to have a negative impact on the kids' welfare. My view, and I've written to the Labour leader about this, Peter Malinowskis, saying that I've written as Avery Hilditch, private citizen, not as Avery Hilditch, Secretary of the Child Protection Party, saying that the Labour government, which I hope we get in 3 months' time, with a Child Protection Party member as well.
Yes, please make that
in the upper house as well. I've written to him, and I've said that one thing that I think the Labour government should do is invest in public housing. They should change invest in low-cost public housing. They should change the legislation that governs rentals so that somebody doesn't get a 2-week notice to vacate. What had happened was this guy's decided that he wants to give the house back to give the house to one of his kids or something like that, to save them having to go out and buy one. Well, that's his right to do that. I'm not going to criticize him for that. But 2 weeks notice, and now leaving a woman with 4 kids living in a car. There is definitely something wrong with that, and that needs to be changed.
Yeah, there was an issue down here, because I lived in the north. Oh, well, so do you, for that matter. But there's a place. There's the old Elizabeth. There's the Holden site down here, which has been vacated for a while. I believe there's some action happening now. But I've often thought, if the government wanted to invest in putting up some reasonable low rental housing, it would have been a great site for it, because it's quite expansive. It's down the road from Elizabeth Shopping Centre. Has all the amenities and everything around it. There's doctors and other places nearby. And it could have become a little hub and a little community of itself. There's a street at Mawson Lakes which is all housing SA properties, and there's a parking area in the middle of the street. It goes around sort of in a circuit, and the houses are fabulous. I've got some clients who live in these places, and I was visiting a client some time back who lives in one of these homes, and the condition of the place was fabulous compared to where she was before. When she was living in one of those old, rustic, terrible housing trust places, she had no desire to maintain it. The housing SA didn't care about it, quite clearly, and neither did she. But this place, she does, because it's in one of the best parts of town. It's got other nice houses and parks and lakes and heaven only knows what else around it, and she feels comfortable there. And so she takes, like if we were able to offer, does this make sense? If we were able to offer more respectful places in which people could live, then they would take care of those places, and they would feel better. So it improves their self-esteem, sense of worth, it values them, and they become better contributors to society as a result.
Yeah, I remember you and me going to visit a young lady. I don't know, it was up in Davern Park or somewhere like that, up in the northern suburbs there.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been moved out of a hovel into a really nice house, and she maintained it beautifully,
Yeah,
and her whole outlook and on life had changed just because of the fact that now she was in a nice house, and she as I say, she cared for it. She cared for the garden compared to the place that she
yeah,
used to live in, where her major task was picking up hypodermic needles from her front yard, where
that's right. Yeah, remember
drug
that.
users had dumped them.
And if you live in trash, you'll
Yeah,
live like
why
trash. You know, like if the place
why
is
would
trash.
you want to change it? Yeah,
That's right. That's right. But when this group of people in this community feel responsible for it, they look after it. They might be on unemployment benefits. There may be drug and alcohol problems, even some DV, but they are prepared to look after it. And I guess because they're prepared to look after it, the other problems that we see often in some of these communities are likely to diminish.
exactly what I was thinking. That if they had decent housing that was affordable, how much difference do you think it would make in the number of reports of neglect or abuse that we see?
Yeah, yeah,
I think it would. I'm not saying it would cure it completely, because obviously it wouldn't. There's still going to be abuse. There's still going to be neglect. But I do think that if they had decent housing that was affordable, that it would have a positive impact on those numbers.
Of course it would. Of course it
You
would.
mentioned.
But do you think the government's prepared to try that though?
Of course
It's
not.
like-
They'd rather
it's
spend $662 million fucking dollars on a basketball court.
It's it's like a social experiment they're not prepared to have. Yeah, we see other countries, particularly Scandinavian countries, who are prepared to take those, who are prepared to put into place those experiments, and we know they work. This is the bizarre thing.
I lived in Germany for 3 years. I lived in the Netherlands for 2 years, and in both of those countries, the majority of the people, they don't own their own home; they rent. And they don't pay thousands and thousands of dollars a week or a month, whatever it is, for that rental. And they get good quality housing at affordable prices. In Germany and in the UK as well, houses are provided by the local council.
Yeah.
Right, and the rental. When you rent a house from the local council in the UK, it's a lot less than it is if you rent it privately. The other thing that's going on here, as I don't know if I said it there, was because the market's so small now, and so many people are getting tossed out of their houses with 2 weeks' notice. There's a lot of gouging going on.
Yeah.
Forcing the rents up. Disgusting.
And I mean, the days are gone, I think, where it becomes imperative for a person to own their own home. Because the middle class is being pushed out by the upper class, those people that are wealthy, and those people who are buying properties from overseas, and eventually, you got to have $1 million to buy anything that's reasonable in Sydney. And unless you've got two incomes and they're dependent, they're continual incomes, it'll be very difficult. So it's getting harder, but I like the idea. We could make it easier for people by providing affordable housing at a reasonable rent that enables them to live a lifestyle that is healthy, comfortable, and productive.
Yeah. One a thing that you mentioned a minute ago is that the Holden site, converting that for public housing. When they closed down the old RAH, one of the things I did back then, and as Avery Hilditch private citizen, and as Avery Hilditch Secretary of the Child Protection Party, was wrote to the state government and said, "Don't knock it down, convert it to low-cost housing."
Yeah, exactly.
And what did they do? They knocked it down.
I don't know what they've converted it to now. I'm not too sure.
It's
whether
part
of the high
Botanic
school
Park
now.
It's part.
Okay.
It's all going back to being part of Botanic Park, because it was built on greenbelt land.
I probably appreciate that more than I would building some skyscraper there, I guess.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting building a skyscraper. I was saying take those buildings and convert them,
which they could have done. They could
easily.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Avery, any parts? Because before we go though, I just want to remind people that they could do this. Do you want to talk about donating to us, please?
Are you going to talk about it today?
Oh, I'll talk about it. Look, we need you to donate to us because it's really, really important to be able to be a productive political party. Now, most political parties have some funding coming in from their memberships, so we would like to think that you could help fund us by becoming a member. That's one way you could do it. You can go to the site that you now see on the screen and press the donate button, which is in about the centre of the screen, and contribute. You can contribute any amount of money that you can. We're grateful for whatever it is that you are able to offer us. So find a way, please, to contribute to us.
Yep. As I said at the live feed on Tuesday, another way they can do it is if you're a member that joined before we introduced membership fees, then you could write to me, secretary at childprotection.party, and say, I'd like to pay $12 a year for my membership, and I will arrange for the payment to be made. There's one other thing I'd like to say.
Yep.
There's that young lady that you mentioned. I won't mention her name because she finds it embarrassing when she's mentioned publicly.
Yeah, that's right.
She has done some really good work looking for resources that can help families going through the child protection system, families who aren't going through the child protection system. And she's identified something like 60 or 70 different resources just in South Australia. And in the next few days, when she's finished that list, I'll be putting it up on our website at childprotection.party, www.childprotection.party. And
I think there are also some people, some places in the state, aren't there, Avery?
Yeah, there is.
Well, so it's not just about.
She's going to do that for every state and territory, but just in South Australia, she's found about 60 or so.
But one of the issues that she raised, Avery, I think we need to mention is that she herself, as a user of the system, found that she wasn't referred to any of these. She was amazed, in fact, wasn't she, that there were so many places that were available around parenting courses and other courses, domestic violence, whatever, and she was never directed to any of them by services here in South Australia. Yeah, appalling, absolutely appalling.
That was it.
All right, okay. Now, what else do we need to do, Avery? Do we do the Patreon thing or not? Have you sorted that out yet?
I've been working on Patreon. Is a way that people can spend as little as $1 a month supporting us. I'm just working on. There's an issue where it's not displaying it properly. I'm just trying to, if somebody goes to patreon.com and searches for Child Protection Party, it's not coming up quite the way it should.
I won't put up the graphic for that then.
No, don't put that up just yet.
If that's the case,
I've got that sorted out. When I've got that sorted out, we can let people know about it.
All right, but right at this moment, though, we'd like people to start to contribute to us. If you've got something that you would like to say and you'd like us to videotape it or record it for you, if you'd like to have a conversation directly like Avery and I having this conversation, then we're more than happy to do that with you as well. You just need to let Avery know at admin@childprotection.party and contact Avery and he'll organise a time in which you can have a chat. I've noticed a few people are asking some questions on the Facebook page about this incident I mentioned earlier. People that are involved in this, one of them is on board at the moment, I noticed, and may be able to respond to some of those questions. It's probably not up to me to do that because I actually haven't got all the answers there either. So just have a conversation and someone might respond to you about that directly. All right. Thanks, Avery. Good seeing you. Take care. Have a good weekend. And good night.
Good night to you.
Be safe.
Good night, everyone else.
Bye, everybody.